Berg,
Present.
Senator Neal, Senator Westerfield, Representative Brown,
Present.
Representative Kulkarni, Representative Timoney, Jameer Davis,
Present.
Hannah Drake, Ricky Jones, O.J. Oleka,
Here.
Erwin Roberts, Chair Givens, Chair Heffron.
Present. And I believe we have a quorum to do business. Okay. So first off, I want to start off, we're very excited to be here today, and something a little different is that we have an official staff person for the commission. And so I would like to introduce Brandon White right here to my left. Please give him a warm introduction. And I'm actually going to let him speak a little bit and share a little bit about himself.
Again, my name's Brandon White. I've worked for Legislative Research Commission for 22 years. Started off as a legislative courier while I was an undergrad at Kentucky State University. I got an undergrad degree, went and got my master's degree, joined the Transportation Committee in 2006, where I served until last month when I got this position. I'm excited about it and just happy to be here. And while I have a public forum, Mama, I love ya.
I am sure your mama is very proud of you, as probably as my mom, who is watching this because my mom watches KET on the regular. So anyways, I would like to go ahead and just do a fresh reminder of what the purpose of the commission is about. We did this last interim too, just kind of making sure that we stay on focus. The commission can have a broad range of topics that we could talk about, but it is important we stay focused so we make sure that we're doing the work that we're called to do. The purpose of the commission shall be to conduct studies and research on issues where disparities may exist across the sectors of educational equity, child welfare, health, economic opportunity, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and any other sectors that are deemed relevant in an effort to identify areas of improvement and providing services and opportunities for minority communities. So today on the agenda, we are going to do an overview of the 22 regular session legislation, and I'm actually going to give it over to my co-chair, Senator Givens, to let him kick that off for us.
Co-chair Heffron, thank you, and it's good to be it's good to be in the interim. For those of us that serve in the legislature, the interim is a nice place to be, and for those of you that are joining us, thank you for being here on this committee. If it's appropriate, Co-chair Heffron, I'd like for the members to reintroduce themselves. Many of us know each other. Brandon and staff have very wisely put a document in our packet with photos of everybody. But if we could start,
It's not in the packet.
Is it not in the packet? Okay, we'll make sure you get a copy at the next meeting, so that if you don't know one of the members at large or one of the public members, that you can put a face and a name together on a regular basis. Mr. Davis, if we could start with you with an introduction, that would be superb, sir.
No problem. Thank you. My name is Jameer Davis. I am the Vice President of Northern Kentucky Community Action Commission. I've been on this committee for about a year now, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the work that we are doing, and I look forward to doing the work in this interim session. I am a practicing attorney. That's what I do for a living. Don't hold that against me. But I'm just happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, and we'll just proceed on to the left.
Hello, everybody. My name is O.J. Oleka. I have the honor of being the president of the Association of Independent Kentucky Colleges and Universities. Proud member of this commission, and was one of the folks who fought hard to make sure that we could have this body as a part of our institution in government. I am a Frankfort kid and happy to be here doing the good work to make Kentucky better for all Kentuckians.
I am Karen Berg. I'm state senator for District 26, which is now completely inside of Jefferson County.
Hello, I'm Representative George Brown. I represent the double sevens of Fayette County, the 77th District, and a proud member. This is my second year on this committee. Got a lot of work to do in Kentucky as well as these United States. Things are shifting and tilting, and hopefully our conversations will lead to some productive transformations for our state. Thank you very much.
Senator Westerfield. Whitney Westerfield, Senator from the 3rd District, now covering all of Caldwell, Christian, and Muhlenberg counties. Race and issues involving race, particularly in the justice system, has been something I've been working on for a few years, though not as long as a lot of others in this body and in the General Assembly. And I'm honored to be a part of the commission, glad that it was created, and look forward to seeing the fruits of the work here. Thank you.
Killing Timoney, State Representative, 45th District. This is my second year on the commission, and I'm very excited to be here. My background is in K through 12 education. I've been employed in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. Worked across all demographics, from low SES schools to affluent schools. So I have a lot of perspective as far as providing opportunities, and I'd like to see us really kind of make some headway this interim, and see some fruits of the labor of the interim when we get into next session.
Say anything? Good. All right, let's dive right in. And I think you read that a moment ago, didn't you?
I did.
Okay, so the charge we have is one that's statutorily created. Senate Bill 10 in the 2021 session created the commission, and it charged us, as my co-chair read, to conduct studies and research on issues where disparities may exist across the sectors of, and I'm stressing these words, the sectors of educational equity, child welfare, health, economic opportunity, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and any other sectors deemed relevant, in an effort to identify areas of improvement in providing services and opportunities for minority communities. In light of that, the co-chair and I, in putting together this first meeting, felt a great place to start. Last year was sort of a formative year for us on the commission, and this is a creature that's a little different. This is a space where, and we touched on it some last year, the conversations are not always going to be easy and comfortable. But I'm hopeful they will always be respectful, and I feel like that was the case last year, and I'm hopeful it will be the case again this year. And in light of that, a great place we chose to start was to take a look at the legislation that was filed and or passed in the course of this last regular session, spring 2022 regular session. So I'm not going to read verbatim everything off of the list, but I'm going to highlight some, and if this rings a bell with you, please ask to be recognized by the chair and speak to why this legislation is something that you felt was important or that you may have issue with. And the first on our list is House Bill 31, Senate Bill 363, the Crown Act. On the Senate side, it was sent to Education. On the House side, it was reported favorably out of the House Judiciary Committee. I feel like many of you are familiar with the legislation. Does anybody wish to illuminate or speak to that legislation?
Mr. Chairman, do you mind tell me again what you're asking us to speak about, whether we support it or
no, we're not going to go down the path of hey, I support it or hey, I don't support it. I think if we don't have to speak about every one of them, but if there's one that stands out to you, you may even scan ahead on the list and put a star by it. And when we come to that one, if it's an area of passion for you, speak to it. Senator?
Well, this one is important. I candidly was asked to carry the bill in the Senate, but my plate was overflowing as it was. I think it's important, and I think it's one that enjoys a lot of support. So I would hope to see it make final passage in 23. I believe it's low-hanging fruit, so to speak. I don't think there's a ton of controversy around it, but perhaps I'm mistaken.
OJ. Mr. Oleka, Dr. Oleka.
I also think that this particular bill is important for a lot of the things that Senator Westerfield mentioned. But to kind of go into detail about why this particular bill is important, again, the Crown Act prevents hair-related discrimination at workplaces and schools. This might sound like one of those silly, mundane things. You ask the question, why should government be involved in this kind of activity? Something like your hair isn't something that you can control. It's not something that you can necessarily change in terms of the texture and the nature of it. It's something that you're born with. And this is something that for young kids, in a lot of ways, young girls, more particularly black girls, oftentimes get picked on for, have to deal with in terms of people not viewing their hair and who they are as a full part of their person. That can manifest itself in terms of discrimination if you have your hair a certain way you're not allowed to wear it like that in school because the rule says you can't. You then could potentially lose confidence in yourself. You don't get to be your full person in a way that could help you focus better in school. If you're a happier kid, I know this just having been a teacher before, if you are a happier student, you're more likely to do well. If you believe that your teachers in your school support you and who you are, you're more likely to do well. So if you are a kid whose hair is in braids or whose hair is in dreadlocks or whose hair is in a different hair that is not straight and thin in its texture, and because of how you style it, it is outlawed, then effectively a piece of you is being outlawed. And this can create a lot of challenges for kids as they're trying to figure out their educational challenges and opportunities along the way. Same thing with adults. If you go to a place of work and you're trying to get a new job, a new career, obviously with the economy the way that it is a labor market. People are looking for new jobs all the time. If you cannot be with your hair something that you were born with and the way that you want it to be because there's discrimination, then there becomes a challenge in terms of you bringing your full self to work. So these are the little things that I think that this commission can help illuminate, because if these are things that you don't have to think about, then you don't think about them. But if you think about them every day, then they can be the types of things that hold you back from success. So I think that this is good that the commission is looking at this particular bill. As Senator Westerfield noted, he was asked to carry it. There's a ton of capacity, so he wasn't able to. But next year, maybe the Senate itself and the General Assembly will work to carry this thing all the way.
Very good. You know, the member seeking recognition on this one. If not, we'll move on to the next one. Senate Bill 275, Hate Crimes, Enhanced Term of Imprisonment. I was just glancing at the LRC website. It appears we had bipartisan sponsors on this legislation. Senator Berg, you were one of the sponsors, the co-sponsors, creating a new section of KRS 532 to provide an enhanced term of imprisonment for any defendant convicted of certain crimes when the defendant intentionally selected the person because of that person's actual or perceived race, color, ethnicity, national origin, religion, mental or physical disability, gender identity, or expression or sexual orientation. Senate Bill 276, Emily's Law. Medicaid coverage for sickle cell disease. I believe this may have been sponsored by Senator Neal, one of our colleagues here. Does anyone know and wish to speak to that legislation? Senate Bill 163, delete the requirement. This was an interesting piece of legislation. It took a lot of twists and turns if you followed this one in the legislature. Senate Bill 163, deleting the requirement that an eligible high school student and eligible post-secondary student not be a convicted felon for keys eligibility purposes. Final version passed, and Staff White, you'll have to help me to understand, passed flipped to the original intent, and it reduced educational opportunities. I knew there was confusion about the bill language by the end. Turn your microphone on there as you speak.
So I think the original bill deleted the language convicted felon, and I think by the time it ended up, there were offenses that didn't qualify, and also deleted that language.
Okay.
So instead of just a blanket coverage, they added other offenses that you cannot get this money through.
I was involved in some of the work on this legislation. Senator Storm was the primary sponsor, and this one was interesting to me in the sense that a student, to be eligible for keys, you have to have graduated from high school to cash in the keys money. You have to also have accumulated keys money along the way, and you have a time-limited period for which you can cash in that keys money. So you've got sort of a trifecta there of things that have to line up just right. You've got to be a good student, have graduated from high school, and be within the time constraints to use the money. But once you are imprisoned, you lose the right to access to that money. And so we had a robust debate and discussion on the Senate side. I think the House did as well. There was some confusion on the language, but I'm hopeful that may come back again in the end. As you can see, it was vetoed by the governor in its entirety, and it was not one we chose to take up and try to override.
Chairman, if I'd like, could I speak on that momentarily?
Yes.
I sponsored the House version of that in 2021. It's a really important. It's a really important piece, and I know that the people who can speak much more eloquently on people returning to the workplace and returning to normal life after being incarcerated. One of the arguments that we would get pushed back on was that, well, why are you rewarding felons? And that's the argument with this, is why are you rewarding someone for committing a felony? And my response there was, I'm really big on giving analogies. It's like, well, if you were an AC repair person and you purchased you're going through vocational training and you accumulated all the necessary tools and equipment required to be an HVAC repair person, and you commit a felony. Okay, all those tools that you accumulated in order to be successful, you commit a felony, you go to jail. While you're in jail, those tools are seized from you. You don't have access to those tools anymore. And then you come out and they're like, well, okay, now be an HVAC repair person. That is the only way that I could see to help people understand that we're not rewarding felons. It is a tool. The money are tools that you've earned. You've earned them through your work in school. When you are tried and you are given a consequence by a judge, he doesn't say, and for the rest of your life, we are going to remove any financial assistance that you've already earned as a student, that you've worked hard for, that you worked hard on the ACT in order to have more money, your GPA, all of those things that you can use for state schools. Because we want you to be here. We want you to stay here and use that money to make our community stronger. That's why I'm such a passionate supporter of this bill, of this, and we need to work out. There was a technicality in there, and we did. I think that the timeline, it was after the veto period. I know that we would have fixed it had it happened beforehand, but there was an oversight there. I don't see this as one that will fail again for whatever reason. I know there were several other capacities, using KEYS money for proprietary schools, for vocational schools, and for using them for ROTC programs that we do not offer within state lines. I know those were several other facets that were part of that, and those are all good things that we need to be looking at. I think one of the next steps too, and this is for me, is that, when was the last time KEYS money allotments changed? It's a long, long time ago. Right. Well, how has college tuition changed since then? Well, it's gone up exponentially. Right. So I think that's a next step that would fit kind of part of that discussion. But this is one that's really, really important. We need to make sure that when people are released and have done the required consequence for their crime, that they have the tools needed to be successful and to plug back in.
Well, your analogy is a powerful one. I had not thought of it that way, but that's a very powerful analogy. Senator Berg, before I go to you and then to Representative Brown, let me apologize to the group. I was working off an initial draft that Brandon had given us about a month ago, and I can understand now why all of you were flipping and looking and scratching and digging. So when we come back, after we finish this conversation, I'll start back at the top of the two-pager because the initial conversation was a one-pager, and I apologize for skipping around. Senator Berg.
I just have a question that's a little relevant to this discussion. Last night, I was... a number of us were at a meeting with search committee at the University of Louisville for their new president. And they were actually asking us as elected members what the KEYS contribution was at this point. How much can you max on it? They didn't even know. So if somebody could, or if somebody who knows that, $2,500 per semester, per year, $2,500 towards tuition.
So if you'll say that in the microphone so anyone watching.
$2,500 per year towards tuition. Thank you.
Yes, I believe that.
Thank you.
The allotments come in two different. There's this when they look at the equation. There's the GPA that factors for one amount, and then the ACT, the score that you get on the ACT factors in for another amount. So combined max total of $2,500.
Representative Brown on this same topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that, Mr. Chimney, thank you. That was a great example. I think that as we talk about and move forward, that our position in Kentucky, in the Commonwealth, as it relates to ex-felons, is so antiquated that we put them in a position that they cannot succeed. I've heard the State Chamber of Commerce talk all the time about workforce, but it's like we've got people out there that have skills that want to go in a different direction and to be useful, contributing members of society. But in Kentucky, we don't allow them to do that. It is that once you have committed a felony, then you essentially ostracized. You have the scarlet letter on your forehead, which is an F for felon. And I think we need to think in terms of how we can help people be successful in our state or in the Commonwealth and be contributing members of society. Right now, that's not there. We essentially ostracize them and we essentially condemn them back to doing what got them incarcerated in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, very well. We will, it's probably good we just warmed up with the easy ones anyway. We're going to dive right back to the top of the list and go right into charter schools with House Bill 9, establishing a funding mechanism for public charter schools. And we had a great, robust debate and discussion about this piece of legislation in the Senate. I'm confident the House did too. Any members wishing to speak on this topic? Okay. House Bill 37. I'm sorry, Representative Brown.
I have a fundamental problem with House Bill 9. Charter schools. The Constitution of the Commonwealth says that we have a responsibility to provide a public education, a common education for all the citizens of the Commonwealth. And that is simply that, what our public education system is put in place to do. What this does, in my opinion, is it sets up private entities to make money off educating our children. Private education is and has always been available. We have parochial schools. I happen to have been, for my first 8 years of education, first to the 8th grade, I was in a parochial school, and my mother paid tuition for me to go there. And it is my opinion that that is still available if people want to send their children to parochial schools. But public schools, to take public money to fund charter schools, which are private schools, is not a good thing for me. And the second thing is that the charter school boards who are in the business of making money, they're going to pick winners and losers, and I've got a problem with that. And I think that's one of my those are my fundamental issues with House Bill 9.
Thank you for that, and I'll speak in favor of House Bill 9 briefly, but very respectfully, having been involved in the work on that on the Senate side especially. The guardrails around the cherry picking are very robust. If you look at the statutory requirements for how those classes must be, how those students must be drawn and selected, it's very robust based on income levels, based on relationship to what the initial charter is filed to have done. These are public charter schools maintained by public school boards. And so there is an element of the public charter space there. Specific to your concern, and again, I say this with great respect, specific to your concern regarding for-profit entities making a profit, I'm thrilled if the student learns. I'm thrilled if the student learns. Whether the student learns as a result of the mechanisms of a for-profit entity or a public school, I'm thrilled. A public school meaning what we call today a public school. I don't think, in my mind, we should get hung up on the mechanism. It's the outcome that we need to be worried about. And I really, really don't think that charters will be successful in communities where robust, quality public schools exist today because the competition. I was a proud Greene County Dragon. My children were proud Greene County Dragons. That connection and allegiance to that public school is strong in my community, and we've got a great school there. If my public school were failing my children, I would sure want another option for them. Now, let's not go too far down this road because we can really get wound tight. Any other members seeking to speak to House Bill 9? Dr. Oleka.
Just a quick comment On the general idea of having school choice as a mechanism, which I think is a good thing, my institutions that I represent are private colleges and universities. And we just had a great conversation about the benefit of KEYS and how those dollars can go to students because they earn them. KEYS dollars, the Kentucky Tuition Grants, the College Access Program, those are all dollars that follow the student. The student makes a choice to go to a public or a private university based in a lot of cases because of their preference or because of proximity or because of what makes the most sense for them getting a quality education. When you have the conversation about school choice, as this bill certainly does, it's that same idea. It's that a student and a family should be able to make the decision where they want to go based on the dollars that should be able to follow them. So that's how I look at this. We celebrate it with the GI Bill with veterans when they make their decision. That's government dollars following a student when they make a decision for college. We certainly like it in the independent higher education sector when you have the KEYS and KTG and CAP dollars that follow students. I think that this could be no different.
Senator Westerfield. It may not be relevant, but I wanted to mention it. It might be worth, because I haven't read the opinion yet, but the case Carson v. Macon came out from the Supreme Court yesterday that involves public funding of private education institutions. Now, that was a religious liberty angle on that because of the nature, and this was out of Maine. But because it's in this vein, I thought it might be worth highlighting that that's something that might cause us to revisit House Bill 9 or those policy decisions going forward. Thank you. Good. Any other member? Representative Brown.
Just one thing that I think is important to remember is that we're talking about allocations going to private education. There's nothing, as far as I understand or as I remember in the legislation, that talks about money coming back to the public schools if the children or the young people don't make it. So
say the last part again. If the children
that if the children are not successful in charter schools, private charters, does the money come back to the public schools?
That's a great debate and discussion and question. And I don't think there is specific that the entity has to turn the money back over to the provider or the authorizer. I don't think there's language that requires that. There is a robust element of reauthorization that has to happen. I think it's either 3 years or 5 years. Every charter has to go back before their authorizer and prove their worth again on a basis of either it's 3 years or 5 years. I can't remember which. So
I think
Co-Chair Heverin.
To your point, Representative Brown, I think
Co-Chair Heverin, you're recognized by the chair.
I'm gonna whoop you with this. I'm just teasing. It's all in good fun. I'm gonna whoop him. Just kind of what you were saying. I know. I was a cougar. Grayson County all the way. So I think to your point, I mean, if the money follows the student, it would go. So if they went to charter schools and they went back to public school, then wouldn't the money go back to the public school? Because if the money followed, was that your question?
I heard that just in the last couple. I don't know who made that statement, but if the money goes with the children when they go to charters or
then it
private
would follow
schools,
them back.
Then it should follow them back.
It does follow them back. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't
Okay.
understand your question.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. It's still an ADA model with funding that does base on attendance. Yes, that's correct.
I think that needs to be something that is emphasized, and we
Okay.
make sure that, because there's some misunderstanding. I had some misunderstanding about that.
Good.
But thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, you don't have to whoop me.
Thank you, Co-Chair Heverin. Thank you for clarifying that for us. House Bill 37, Maternal Care Act for Implicit Bias. I'm not familiar with this legislation, Co-Chair Heverin.
I am not familiar with it either. I think that Representative Scott maybe. I'm looking at the ACLU back there. Who was the one that introduced this legislation? The Maternal Care Act for Implicit Bias. Yeah, Representative Scott. Okay. That is something I know she's very passionate about. And last year, I want to point out, last year in 2021 interim, I worked on legislation for maternal mortality, making sure that we get the data for that. And I think just maternal care is incredibly important, especially with everything going on right now across the country. But making sure that we've got, that we're taking care of new moms and babies and making sure that they're in the best position possible. I don't know. Implicit bias is such I know that Senator Westerfeld and I have talked about implicit bias before. So I would like to look at the legislation just a little bit more, but I do think it's an important conversation to continue to have with maternal mortality and maternal care for new mamas.
Senator Berg.
I'm not versed on this particular piece of legislation, but I will tell you that the maternal mortality rate for Black women in the state and nationally, not just in the state, but is definitely higher. And the thought process is there has to be some communication barriers that people may not be aware of or may not know how to navigate that have to be impacting this data, because as far as we know, we're not taking a patient based on the color of their skin and treating them differently, but we know the outcomes are statistically significantly different. So I would suspect that what this is first of all, patients' rights, to make sure that patients know they have certain rights, because not all patients are aware of that, and then to start tracking and trying to train people and see if we can impact the maternal death rate, which is something that needs to be done.
It is. And I think Senator Berg, so House Bill 212, what it did is it required that for the Maternal Mortality Review Committee to gather information of geography, demographics, and income. Yeah. And I think that CHFS has been a little held up on the income portion because they're like, well, we don't get income. And so I've requested back to them that if they could just even recognize if they were a Medicaid patient or not, because that would give us some type of income level with poverty. And so I think, and that's something that Chair Givens and I have talked about with Brandon, is what legislation have we passed that asks for data that's not actually being taken care of by the cabinets, and that's not a specific punch at administration at all. That's just sometimes there's really a breakdown between having conversations of what we do in the legislature versus what actually gets done in the executive branch. So having those conversations, and I think in October we're really going to try to focus on health outcomes. The month of October.
So in that vein, Senator Berg, if you have a knowledgeable, talented speaker that can speak to this question, a researcher, demographer, sociologist, think about the October meeting. It's going to be based, we're focusing that October meeting on health outcomes and child welfare. So if you wish to dig deeper into this question, find us a really good speaker that you want to bring. And that's something all members should know. The chairs choose the speaker, but we are always open to input from any of the members and would welcome input from you. So if you have a presenter, bring that presenter to Brandon. He'll get the name to us. We'll interview the presenter and be glad to proceed from there. Anything else on this one before we move on?
Senator Berg.
Senator Berg.
If I may respond for a second. That sounds good. Data is very important, and the collection of data is very important. The truth is, on some of these issues, particularly maternal mortality death rates in Black patients versus white patients, we have the data.
We have the data, but do we have the causal connection there? That's what I'm curious. Bring someone in. If it's an implicit bias, bring a talented speaker in on implicit bias. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You finish and then I'll follow you. Go ahead.
Sometimes these are so significantly multifactorial that to try to actually find which common denominator, particularly in the sample size that we're talking about, which isn't going to be a large enough sample size, can be overwhelmingly difficult. And you can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to prove something that you already know exists. And it might be possible that we could look at some better models as what other states have actually implemented to try to impact the data that we are well aware of and have been for years.
So to your point, and I was about to make the very same statement that you made in a different way, and I'm glad I stopped because you made it very eloquently. In almost all of these difficult issues, there's never going to be a single silver answer that says, you fix me and the problem is solved. It's going to be a multifaceted, many, many different confluences of things coming together to create that problem. But keep that meeting in mind in October. We're going to keep moving. We got about 15 minutes. We can certainly run over, but we don't want to run over too much. House Bill 120, I was looking at the list of sponsors. This was an impressive list of bipartisan sponsors seeking to expand eligibility for preschool education programs to children who reside in households with an income at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. I presume that was raising that to the 200% federal poverty level in that conversation. House Bill 120. House Bill 126. FAFSA requirement for high school completion, reported favorably out of House Education, posted, and then returned to rules. This is one I'm quite interested in for different reasons than just the focus of this commission. I think we've got a college going rate that continues to just slide a little lower. And I'm not saying college has to be the choice of everybody, but if we can get students to complete FAFSA, which if you've ever done it, is a nightmare of a challenge. Senator Westerfield, for those that have young children, you might want to start studying now on how to complete the FAFSA. It is a monster.
Chairman Givens, would you mind to explain what the FAFSA is for maybe those in the room that don't have children or haven't gone to college since FAFSA was released?
There is a federal, and I won't get the acronym exactly right, but it is a very thorough analysis, and if someone in the education space can explain this more eloquently than me, please interrupt me. But you go through all of your income, all of your peripheral income, what you've reported on your taxes, any gifts from anybody in the world that's ever given you anything, and this is a federally filed document that basically qualifies you for financial aid. Dr. Oleka, can you add to that?
I can add to this. Actually, thankfully, Senator Westerfield, those of us who do have younger kids, they just simplified the FAFSA.
They waited, yeah.
All these folks who've had the tough one, we don't have to deal with that. So that is a fact. But Co-Chair Givens is correct. It is the way that students who want to go to college or any post-secondary anything can get the most aid possible. The part that obviously is most concerning to folks if you require it is that people will have to give out information they don't want to give out. There are waivers. There are ways that you can not have to fill out the FAFSA if it is a great burden or great challenge for you in terms of making it a graduation requirement, which is the case here in House Bill 126. The benefit for those who do fill it out is that they see that they have access to aid that they didn't know that they had access to. A lot of students decide not to go to college or stop out of college because they think they can't afford it. But if you are a student who does well academically in Kentucky and you come from a low-income background, again, I can only speak for the private institutions that I represent, you can get up to $30,000 of non-loan aid to be able to go to college, which is incredibly significant and can make college affordable for you. That's the benefit of filling out the FAFSA, is that you now see that as an option for you. So that's what this bill is attempting to do. It has come up in a number of different forms. A couple of different states, I believe Illinois, Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken, have passed this before, and they've seen a little bit of uptick. Kentucky, for its part, does rather well in FAFSA completion. Again, we've seen a slide for the obvious reasons. Kids weren't in school. It's the place where they typically fill it out. But the hope is that this can improve and get a little bit better, and a bill like this could potentially help in that effort.
Senator Berg.
Again, last night I met with the board of directors of the University of Louisville. This was their one ask of us, was could we please require FAFSA be filled out in high school? It was their one ask of their representatives and legislators that were there last night. Could we please require this? That Alabama has done it. If Alabama can do it, Kentucky can do it. They think it will give children the opportunity to understand, and families, the opportunity to understand that there is aid available, that there is a path forward, and that it would have a significant impact on enrollment in the state.
Great.
It was their one ask.
Great. If it appears from the LRC website that Representative Riley was the primary sponsor. If any of you run into him, make a mental note to let him know that we talked about it in this committee, that there's. And I will also, as I cross paths with him, since he and I overlap House and Senate districts, I will certainly do that. an approach to consider, Dr. Oleka, because I think your point about a requirement for high school graduation or completion is a high bar. Maybe an approach to consider is let's roll it into the high school accountability model. The school accountability model for all of these schools, the rate of FAFSA completion becomes one of the many metrics rolled into that school accountability model, thus providing some positive incentive to the schools to get this done without penalizing the students that face barriers beyond what we might know. Okay. House Bill 131, allow governing body of consolidated local government to implement rent control ordinances in a developing area. Any member with any knowledge on that one? House Bill 250 had a lot of debate and discussion, and I think we've arrived at a great place. House Bill 250 being the KSU legislation. Was reading in the local Frankfurt paper last night the 4 interim candidates they have, and all 4 look like rock stars. I was really impressed by the quality of the interim candidates that they've brought in to look at turning this institution around, and so I'm very hopeful in that. I was also informed today that next month Representative Tipton will be chairing the subcommittee, the Appropriations Revenue Subcommittee on the House side, and they will be bringing some KSU speakers in. So if you have interest in that topic, members, please stay tuned. It's vitally important that we get this right for our citizens and for that institution. Any other members on that topic? House Bill 737, establish Kentucky Urban Farming Youth Initiative to promote farming to youth in urban counties and at least one urban University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service office. That's an interesting one. That had not been on my radar until you, Mr. Smith, put it on my radar. So thank you, Mr. White, put it on my radar. Thank you for doing that. Any members speak to that one? Senate Bill 10, establish temporary work permit requirements for a registered nurse who is a graduate of a foreign nursing school. Now, that's an interesting one in light of the challenges that we've had with staffing, and certainly could have some overlap into minority communities. That's a fine line to walk. We talked about it a lot in the legislative session about the need to make sure that we get these hospitals and offices staffed, but we also have to have them staffed with talented, competent people. Because there is a sense that government is credentialing these folks, a right sense that government is credentialing these folks, and we don't want to put just anyone into those very important positions. Senate Bill 103 require racial and ethnic community criminal justice and public safety impact statements for certain legislation and administrative regulations. That's a good segue into a conversation that I'm going to press Brandon to grab the microphone and talk about, because Brandon, in his new role here as our committee staff administrator, is also going to have action to do, and he serves as a resource in the midst of a session. So Brandon, share with the group what you shared with me specific to when we're in session and members have a need to try to understand the perceived or the concerns about impact of legislation on minority communities. You're available to help.
Yes, I'll be available to answer any questions you have. But at the same time, I can only give my opinion and not overall opinion. But if you have any questions on any legislation, just come and see me or call me. I'm available.
So that's a really good point. Brandon still wears the hat that all of our LRC people so talentedly wear, which is that nonpartisan hat. He's not going to weigh in and say, you really need to do this. But if you say to him, I'm really interested in doing this, what would be the impact in your opinion? He can do some research and provide some information. And then I would mention to Dr. Oleka and to Mr. Davis, if either of you have need for information, the LRC folks are phenomenal at research. I mean, they are gangbusters at finding out fact-based answers to questions. So take advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr.
I'd like
Representative Brown.
at this opportunity to just talk about the LRC and its staff. They are absolutely awesome. Coming from local government to state government, we have the resources to get the answers that we need and to help us move legislation forward and to serve the citizens of the Commonwealth. It would be nice if we had what they had on the federal level as far as staff is concerned and resources. But for the state level, I think we have an outstanding group of people, and I just want to give them their kudos.
And I think they're a great shout out, and I think they're one of the best kept secrets in Kentucky because I didn't really had no clue. Had no clue. A very, very talented group of folks, and we appreciate their work day in and day out. All right, we've talked about 163, Senate Bill 173, requiring translation of the medical orders of scope of treatment form into Spanish and any other languages as needed. So that one, any of you have any comments on that before I make a comment? It saddens me that we even have to legislate that this happens. This is something that could have been done easily in regs, and I'm scratching my head wondering why it wasn't already done in regulations, because we seem to be prolific in our promulgation of regulations that create barriers. Why wouldn't we want to create and promulgate regulations that lower barriers? But that being what it is, it passed and was signed by the governor into law.
Co-Chair, can I say one
thing?
Please
Please do. Yes,
absolutely.
Please.
I agree with you 100% on that. In my former role as Executive Director of the Office for Civil Rights, it was my duty to make sure that all of the forms that the Transportation Cabinet had were available in Spanish, right? And when I speak to not only this legislation, but the other legislation that we've talked about when it comes to House Bill 31 and House Bill 37, and me practicing as a civil rights attorney, the thing that I see most is usually there's not one big egregious action, right? There's just small little actions that lead to differential treatment of an individual. So when we have low-hanging fruit like this bill, and also like House Bill 31, we have to take action. We have to take action fast. So I thank this commission, and I thank the legislators and everyone who has acted fast on both of those bills.
Mr. Davis, thank you for your kind words. On the next one, you're probably going to want to retract those words because it appears on the next one that we didn't act so swiftly and judiciously. But no, in all seriousness, thank you for that and for your insights there. Senate Bill 238. Senator Berg, I think you were a co-sponsor on this one. Cosmetology exams available in multiple languages. I'm intrigued by Mr. Davis's comments, and are we inadvertently, not with purpose, not with bad intent, but inadvertently creating barriers for people that we don't realize we're creating? And that wouldn't be rocket science to translate that exam into another language, I wouldn't think. So, Senate Bill 265, that was one I sponsored. That was part of the turnaround in the process whereby we reconstituted the board. Give credit to the governor on that. He worked with us to do that swiftly, to get them approved and get them signed off on while we were in session and get this turnaround moving in the right direction. So again, 265 KSU. We've got 3 left on my list. Senate Bill 319, create and appropriate to a Black and Minority Contractor Assistance Fund. Senate Bill 319. Anyone with knowledge on that one? Representative Brown, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to commend the state in looking to deal with minority purchasing and diverse, increasing diverse spend. We spend billions of dollars, and our diverse vendors are, I think, in a lot of instances, locked out of the possibility of participating in procurement with the state. And I think in a lot of instances, because we do what we do, the way we do it, and the way we've always done it, that we're not sure in a lot of instances of getting the best price and or the best service, and certainly that we could enhance the possibilities for growing the diverse vendor base in our state if we were to be more flexible in that realm.
Great. Any other members seeking recognition on this piece of legislation? Thank you, Representative Brown. Next on our list is Senate Bill 331. It appears to have been sponsored by Senator Neal. Eligible defendants shall not be detained on money bail. Senator Westerfield, do you have any comments on that legislation? Any brief comments on that
no,
legislation?
No, I don't. Not brief. That's a debate we need to continue to have until we don't need to have the debate anymore. But that's a big mess, and it needs to be reformed. I think there are constitutional issues with money bail, but that's important.
What are the solutions for those of us that don't operate in that space on a regular basis? Give us a 2-minute path forward.
Well, the solution is even shorter than that. Elect judges and prosecutors that will apply standards of bail without regard to the political consequences of their decisions. They have today the discretion necessary to solve the problem. They must exercise it wisely, as we must in different ways. That's the fastest solution. Beyond that, the solution would be tying their hands and limiting in some way their discretion, or guiding it, maybe not eliminating it, because I think that would be unwise, but guiding it in such a way that they are prevented or precluded from making or exercising poorer discretion than we'd like.
Thank you. Any other member on this topic? All right. So, Mark, Reverend Brown, you wish to say something?
Yeah, I'd just like to get more information on that, because it appears that with the bail system, what we have is that poor people go to jail and people that have resources don't. And because of the bail bond system, and you know, hopefully we can, maybe you and I can talk about that, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit more.
Senator Westerfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. I appreciate the inquiry. Thankfully, we don't have bail bondsmen. State government, the General Assembly, and the governor's office back in, I guess, the 70s fixed that problem, and we are blessed by not having that extra burden, because that creates another political layer of trouble to making reform. But the bottom line is that you've got judges and prosecutors who don't take positions on bail. And this isn't universal. It's not at all the case in every single county with every judge or with every prosecutor. The most recent example that comes to mind, it was in Louisville a few years ago. There was a guy that didn't rank as a serious offender at all, and he was released pre-trial on some measure of bail, and then went out and committed murder. They're all worried, and if you were to map every bail decision our judges statewide do every single day, the vast majority of them work out exactly the way that the judges anticipated and the prosecutors wanted. The vast majority of cases work out just fine. But we legislate, as we often do, to the edge case, that one outlier that just was an atrocious thing, and no judge or elected prosecutor wants to run for office again by being the judge or the prosecutor that oversaw or blessed the release of this person that goes and does something horrific. And so they have that discretion today. The constitutional issue is the one that you just raised. If you're wealthy enough, then money bail doesn't really matter. But if you don't have any money, before COVID, we had 7,000 people sitting in pretrial confinement who were Class D felons, or charged with Class D felony offenses, who had no hold. So the population of pretrial was bigger than that. But just the lowest, most not violent at all, the most unserious offenses. We had 7,000 people sitting in our county jails, and they aren't guilty.
Just a point to that. We had a conversation yesterday talking about jails in local government and folk that are incarcerated, and how local governments pay for those folk being incarcerated, but have state charges but haven't been convicted yet.
Yes, sir.
So that also is a concern and a problem that is out there.
So I sense some real passion around this topic. As we had a moment ago, we charged Senator Berg to look at the October meeting.
He started it, Mr. Chairman.
It's all
I tried moving along.
Very well done. Very well done.
He got me fired up.
We charged Senator Berg to assist us in fleshing out the agenda and presenters in that October Health Outcomes and Child Welfare meeting. We are dedicating, to those of you that are passionate on this, and there's a lot of passion in this space, the September meeting is slated to be around corrections, the Justice Cabinet, and AOC. So if you have a presenter or on this topic or any other related to that September conversation, please let Brandon know, and we'll get it. September meeting dedicated to that. All right, we're looking then at the last one on the list, Senate Joint Resolution 158, direct the Department of Education to create a task force to examine equity and inclusivity of racial and demographic representation in education curricula. And I'm not familiar with the sponsor, Senator Thomas. Very good, very good. All right, we've been an hour. I'm gonna turn it back to my co-chair to wrap us up, and I will say that we did have something we had talked about in the interim last year, was trying to do dinner together one night after one of these meetings. Just all of us sit down and break bread together. July's not going to work out because there's some conflicts there, but if you'll tentatively try to scratch on your calendar August the 23rd, our August meeting is slated for August the 23rd. We may try to see if anyone, any members of the commission are available and interested in doing dinner, and we will spring for our two staff people. If they've still got you stuck here, we'll take care of the meal for you. Brandon, we'd be honored to have you join us. Co-Chair Hevern.
We will take care of the meal with our personal monies, not
That's correct.
taxpayer dollars. For the record, this got out of a really tough last few months. I like to be on the record for that. Our next meeting will be July 20th, 2022. And as as Co-Chair Givens has mentioned, I just want to kind of briefly go over whenever we were talking about how we wanted this interim to look, we looked at each month and we looked at the legislation of what this commission is tasked to do, and we kind of took each opportunity to place it with the month. And so, as he said, in September, we're going to do justice aspect. In October, child welfare and health outcomes. In July, get my notes out. We're going to focus on economic opportunity. In August, it will be on educational equity. And in November, we really want to try to talk about data and possibly commission legislation. And I really am very excited, and I think I speak for Co-Chair Givens as I say this. We're very excited to have Brandon full-time. I think it's really going to change the outlook of the commission. It was really hard last interim to kind of juggle everything and stay on track. And so I think it's going to do us a lot of good to have him here to be able to talk to members and continue these conversations all throughout the year. So Brandon, we're very, very much looking forward to you being on the team, helping us. If there are no questions or comments,
just real quick.
I love how active you are this meeting, Representative Brown.
I've been building up. Can you be sure to send us out that list of proposed items that we'll discuss and the meetings in which we'll discuss them?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder, if you have suggestions for speakers, please send that to Brandon, and then he will get that to Co-Chair Givens and I, and we will interview the speakers. We just really want to make sure that we're staying on task and making sure that we're having the appropriate conversations through all of this. So if there are no questions or comments, we are adjourned until July. Thank you.